Welcome back to the channel. Today we're finally going to finish our 2002 Chevy Silverado. This is the regular cab short bed. That used to be a red rollover. Now it's black and not rolled over. So let's take a little trip down memory lane to remember where this truck started. And if you want to see the details of everything that went on, there's a link to a playlist up there. Otherwise, well, here's a reminder. I brought this rust-free truck home from Little Rock, Arkansas when it was cold and snowy. Probably the first time it ever saw snow. Welcome to Illinois, little guy. And then we waited a little while before I brought it out and showed you guys. So it's now a little bit warmer. We're going to remove the window so we can take it for a ride. The glass guy on the internet told me this is how you remove the windshield without breaking it. I think I did okay, even though mine was already broken. Then we used our Scott-powered roof straightener so that I wasn't bumping my head while I was driving down the road. And then we took it for a ride, just to annoy the internet. And also because I'm lazy and didn't want to put it back up on the trailer when it runs and drives just fine. And we cut our rear window out. Well, at least part of it, just the bottom. The top had already peeled away from the primer, so it was half out. We very carefully removed our doors so as not to cause any damage to them. Oops. And we pulled out our interior so that we could work on it, but mostly so that we could find any loose change that was underneath the seats, or any other presents we might find. Once both seats are out, you can pull the center console out, center seat, whatever. And we can pull our carpeting out of here. It's pretty nasty, not going back in. And we pushed our roof around a little bit. See it bringing it forward, open up that gap between the bed and the cab. Then we pulled the headliner down because I never get to work on a GM truck where I don't have to take the headliner out for one reason or another. And I don't feel like fishing that wiring harness out right now, so we're just gonna set it over here on the hood. I went and got the mobile frame rack. We're gonna use it to lift our bed off of here. There goes tool experts telling me I'm misusing tools. And now we'll use the mobile frame rack for what it was designed for. We're going to push the center of this roof up a little bit more. Maybe I should have left the bed on. Oh, they weighed enough to straighten that out. So now we have our used doors. We're going to set those on. They're the wrong color, but hey, beggars can't be choosers, right? We're painting the whole thing anyway. Everything's the wrong color. Now we need to square up our roof, so we're going to push it back to the side. And we need to go up a little bit higher on the front here. Make sure our door gaps are nice and everything closes. We can pull out this cab panel and start hacking our roof off of here. These are just rough cuts. We're going to finish it up the right way. We're just getting this out of our way for now. In the pile. More trimming. And we'll trim this B-pillar out of the passenger side. You know where this goes. So we trimmed out our donor piece so it fits together like a puzzle. I called and ordered a pizza so I get a little help, and we're using the mobile frame rack to slowly lower our piece into place. I didn't get a pizza, if you were wondering. Not that that should be a shock. And once our big piece was in, we can go ahead and throw our cab corners back on. This one wasn't bent in the accident, so we can use the whole thing. This one, we're only going to use part of it because our donor was routed out at the bottom. Luckily, the original one was straight at the bottom, so we'll overlap it there. Got it in place, so we'll put it together with some bubble gum and duct tape, and then we'll start taking this all apart so we can paint it. Pull off the bumper and the fenders. If the fact that it's rust free and all that dirt falling out of there didn't tell you it was from the south, those chrome wheel opening moldings definitely should. A little help from the shadow gnome. We'll pull the doors off. Now we're going to pull the cab off so we can paint it. And to paint it right, since we're not painting the same color, we need to pull our dashboard out. Pull our heater box out of here. And now it's all painted, so we're going to throw it all back together. Toss our sound insulation in there, put the heater box back in, put our dash back in. And I'll save you the trouble of commenting. Yes, I changed the heater core while I was there. It's in the other videos. Stick our dash back up here. A lot easier than when I had to do this by myself. And put our cab back on. And throw our doors back on. This door back on. And then we can throw our fenders on. We just put the doors on so we can throw the fenders on. We got to take them back off and edge them out. But we need to be able to line up our fenders. Got a new fender for this side. And we'll throw our hood on here. That was a new hood. The fenders and hood are already edged. That way I don't have to take them back off. Originally I was going to put a bedside on our original bed, but I got a really good deal on this entire bed. It isn't worth my time to go ahead and pull the bedside off and swap it over. So we're just going to paint this entire bed and drop it in one piece. And then I have an extra bed laying around in case anybody wants one. Our bed's all painted. We can use our mobile frame rack to drop it down into place. The rest of the truck got painted as well. So we can throw our front bumper back on. Got our supervisor making sure I'm getting it right. Throw the tailgate on. Try not to drop it on the floor. That would upset the painting gnome. And just to freak out the safety experts, we'll show how we mounted the tires. I think that's the gist of it. So hopefully we're all up to speed now on how our red rolled over became a black not rolled over Chevy truck. We have been driving around for a little while, and because we've been driving around for a little while and it is a Chevy truck, well, we got a check engine light to fix, because would it be a Chevy truck if the check engine light wasn't on? The answer is no. So we're gonna fix our check engine light as well as a couple other dash emojis. And if you need a little more detail on the rest of this repair, go ahead and watch that playlist. It will answer every one of your questions you could possibly have, including why I didn't just throw a cab on this thing to begin with. So let's fix our check engine light. So if you were playing the at-home Chevy truck check engine light guessing game, you probably thought I'd be headed underneath the truck to change the event valve. Well, amazingly enough, this thing does not have an evap code. Instead, it has what every other Chevy truck of this era had. It has a knock sensor code, which means we have to go down into Narnia to get to it. It's underneath the intake. It's really not that bad of a job, but it can be intimidating when you gotta pull the intake off. So we'll pull off our air tube here. We've had off 100 times, so it should come off pretty easy. And we can disconnect our throttle cable and our cruise control. One bolt the bracket for our throttle and cruise control cables. I'm just going to leave them attached. And we can't get to the last bolt with the ratchet, so we'll just use a wrench. One bolt the other throttle bracket. Now we'll set our cables off to the side. Now we can unplug our purge valve, the electrical connector, and the vapor line. We'll unbolt the wiring harness. And we'll move it as far as we can. The map sensor in the back we can unplug. Move a little further. And disconnect the idle air control and the throttle position sensor from our throttle body. And pull off the breather hose. And we'll reach way back here and we'll pop off the little safety clips on our fuel lines. We got our little fuel line release tools. Flip them in there and slide our fuel lines off and relieve the fuel pressure at the same time. And of course, you know, those are available in my Amazon store. Link is in the description. Now you pull our vacuum hose off of here. This goes back to the PCV valve. I just use that pick to work the hose off of there. I don't want to yank on it. The plastic is kind of old. I don't want to take the chance of breaking it. Pull our brake booster vacuum line out of there. And we'll unplug our PCV valve. And take that whole hose and stick it up here out of our way. We got everything on that side. Now we can start unbolting our intake. And we can unplug our unfriendly fuel injectors. You have a little safety tab you're supposed to pull up and then press the tab to release them. In theory, it doesn't quite work that way. So sometimes you got to use a pick on them. Sometimes they work like you're supposed to. You just got to yank a little harder. Push everything out of our way. And we had to climb into our work to get to this last little bit of wiring harness, unplug it in the back of the engine. And we can set it off to the side. Now we can see all of our bolts. Unbolt our intake. We can unbolt the throttle body. There's a couple of coolant lines on the bottom, and I don't feel like opening up the cooling system. So we'll just unbolt the throttle body and move it out of the way. I could have left the throttle cables on it, I know, but then they're over the top of the intake and there's already a wiring harness up there that complicates things that we have to go underneath. So that's one less thing, and the cables aren't that hard to take off, so I take them off. And then of course the bolts for the intake don't want to come out. They're going to find their home and keep me from pulling this intake out of here. We also needed to fight with our evap line that goes around our fuel rail. Since we didn't take our fuel rail off, we just left the injectors and everything in there. It's easier to fight with that evap line. So all the junk that was sitting on top of our intake fell down in the ports of our heads and landed on top of the valves. So we need to get it out of there. You know, the dirt, the sand, the armadillos, whatever else that might have fallen in there. And our vacuum hose is a little bit too big to get down into those ports. So what I did was cram the end of it into a funnel, and it gives us a nice small pointy end so we can reach down in those ports and get everything out of there. Did you ever think you'd see the day when I was not only cleaning but giving you tips on how to clean? So now we can get to what we came for, our knock sensors, which are under these little caps.
Pop them out of there. It's usually the rear one that's the problem. And it looks like this is definitely the case here. But we're going to change both of them just to be safe. I don't want to come in here again. They have two little tabs that you squeeze on either side. Or you just take a screwdriver and pry them off of there until they break. And that's what we did. We're changing everything anyway, so we don't care. This one shouldn't take much prying. There's not much left of it. It's pretty much deteriorated. And there's a lot of junk in there.
Hey, let me see that real quick. Let me see that vacuum real quick.
Before we go pulling our knock sensors out of there, we're going to vacuum out those little tubes and get all the junk that's sitting around our knock sensors out so that it doesn't fall into the threads when we take the sensors out. So what happens is all the water and debris and everything else gets in there, past those little caps, and then just sits in that little well and soaks the metal in there until it finally just rusts away to nothing. And as rusty as those knock sensors get, I've never had one that I didn't just break loose and spin right out. So the threads never seem to be affected, which I'll gladly take. I have had them before where they were just little rusty nubs. This one still had a hint of a nut on top of it. And our front one isn't too bad. Probably be okay, but there was our rear, there was our front, and there's our new ones. The plastic gets brittle as well, so just change them all. And always use AC Delco, OE stuff. You don't want to cause problems by putting aftermarkets in there, because you don't want to go back in here. So while we're in here, we're going to change our cam sensor, because we also have a cam sensor code that comes and goes. And I think it's probably because our cam sensor is leaking oil out of the electrical connector. That's usually a pretty good indication that they're bad. So there's just one bolt that holds it down. And we can pry it out of here. There's an O-ring on it that's, well, been in there for probably 20 years, so it's probably pretty brittle. It's going to take a little prying to get it out of here. Even if it wasn't bad, probably would have been a good idea to change it anyway. Boy, these are easy to get to now. I win. I gotta pull our little gasket out of there for our connector. Stayed on the wrong end. Before we go dropping our new cam sensor in here, we're going to go ahead and clean up the area where it's going to slide into. Make sure there's no dirt that's going to fall in there or mess with our O-ring. Who is this guy doing all this cleaning? What channel am I on? So we have our new sensor. Put a little grease on the O-ring and snap it down in there. And little did I know at this time, this was the exact moment where not following my own advice really came back to haunt me. If you want to know exactly what went wrong and how, there's a link in the description. It'll take you to the video that shows you all of my struggle. So now we're going to throw our gasket back on our connector and plug it back in. And hopefully it does not leak oil out of that connector anymore. And now on Amazing Discoveries, Scott's going to clean yet one more time. We're going to clean this lifter valley cover where our knock sensors go. It's just coated in dirt and grease and everything else. We need to get it all cleaned off of there, so we're going to scrape a lot of it off. Then we're going to wipe it down using a little carb cleaner to kind of clean it up a little bit. It's a little dark in there, but after we get it all cleaned up, it's nice and bright. Make sure that everything's clean and out of our way. Nothing fell down in there. Now this is a TSB from way back in the day. I don't know if they've updated it. I've never looked because this actually works for me. It's to take some RTV silicone and just make like a little dam around these covers so that if any water does get underneath that intake, it goes around the covers. And it seems to work. So you put it on there, you let it get nice and solid, and then you put your knock sensors in. You don't want to put it in there and then slap the intake on right away, or it'll just make a big mess and stick to the bottom of the intake. You want it to stay built up and leave a good 1/4 inch high ridge all the way around. Tighten down our knock sensors. Click. And now we'll slip our harness in here. I got a brand new harness. Instead of trying to mess with the pigtails and splice them together, these harnesses are like 12 bucks. They're just the 2 pigtails and the plug at the end. It's a short harness. It only goes to the back of the intake anyway, so it's real easy to replace. Comes with the new little caps in there that aren't all brittle. They're actually rubber instead of hard plastic. So you plug in the knock sensor, then slide the cap down, and then push the cap into our little lifter valley cover. Nice tight seal in there. Hopefully it keeps all the water out. Between that and our little dam that we made with our RTV silicone, hopefully those last a while. We're going to change our intake gaskets. They clip on the bottom of the intake. Take our old ones off and toss them. And we'll clean up our intake, because this is the cleaning channel now. Carb cleaner will take off all that carbon that's built up on there. Just wipe it off. Those little foam pieces are actually supposed to keep the water from getting underneath the intake. However, they don't actually work. So that's why we build our little RTV dam underneath there, and hopefully anything that gets in there will just head its way back out of there. That's why it's usually the rear one that gets all the water in it, because it's tilted towards the back. But I have seen ones where both the front and rear are completely eaten away. Snap our gasket on the other side. Our intake's ready to go back in. We did clean up our heads where the ports are, but you've seen enough cleaning, so you'll have to trust me. And if you peek underneath the intake right now, you can kind of see it. So, because I know you guys have trust issues. So now we're struggling to get that evap line underneath our fuel rail. Still better than taking that line out of there. It does unplug in the back, but it wasn't being friendly and I didn't want to mess with it. So the throttle body is hanging up on the bottom. It wants to go with. And it gave up. Lift up our harness a little bit so we can slide it back in there. Finally, I think we got it where it belongs. Doesn't look like we have anything trapped underneath it. Those injector connectors love to find their way underneath the intake into the ports. We can push all our bolts in. Start them a couple threads. And we can tighten them all down to manufacturer specs. Actually, I'm just going to snug them up and I'll go back over them with a torque wrench. These actually do matter. Now we can put our wiring harness back on the stud and route the front of it next to our alternator. Plug in that first injector. And the rest of the harness is over here. So we'll flip in the rest of our injectors. and snap in our fuel lines. Put our fuel line locks on there. Tighten that down on our wiring harness. Plug in our purge valve, vapor line, and our plug, and then stick our throttle body up there. Put the nuts on the front of that, and then plug in our idle air control valve and our throttle position sensor. And stick our throttle cables back up there. Bolt the bracket down. And bolt the front bracket down. And then reconnect our throttle cables. Throttle cable and cruise control cable. We'll climb back here and hook up the rest of our injectors. They connect a lot easier than they disconnect. And put our PCV hose in there. Slide it onto our intake. And go way back there, plug it into our PCV valve. And then while we're up on top of the engine, we'll also plug in our brake booster. We can head up to the front and put our air duct back on. And this other breather hose that I almost forgot. Get back up to the air box and tighten our clamps up. Plug in our mass airflow sensor. And then we can put our little cover on top of it and never speak of this job again. While we were driving it around, in addition to our check engine light, we also had an anti-lock brake light and a regular red brake light. So we're going to check our ABS and see what our codes are. And it's 265. Pretty common on these things. It's a very easy test. Well, if the problem is the EBCM, it's a very easy test. And while we're here, we're going to check and make sure that we didn't set any codes. Everything's good in our engine. Yep, no codes. Since we're here, we'll keep checking. Make sure all the monitors are set. So we just want to make sure they all say test complete. Not supported means it doesn't have that monitor, so we don't care about those. We just don't want to see not complete. And they're all good. So now we can go ahead and test our EBCM. Pretty easy. Key on. And make sure we have a power and a ground to our connector. And we do. So that means our circuit is good and our EBCM is bad. If you don't have power there, well, there's a little bit more to the test. Usually a broken wire. Most of the time, it's the control module. So we'll just unplug the other plug and dump all the dirt out of it. So we're just going to unbolt the control module from the top of the valve body. That way we don't have to take any brake lines off or bleed the system or anything like that. We're only going to send out just the module anyway. So there's just a couple Torx bolts on the top. There's actually 4. The outside ones are easier to get from outside the frame. Once you got them all off of there, just wiggle it up and it'll slide off the solenoids. And squeeze it out of there. There isn't much room. And if the cab mounts are collapsed, you might actually have to lift the cab up a little bit. Now that we got it up and out of there a little bit, there is one plug that goes to the pump motor, so it's a little easier to get to it now. Unplug that, and our module is out. And if you need to drive the truck around, you still can. So there's where the 4 bolts go on the top. And since this module is a Kelsey Hayes, Upfix can rebuild it for us. So Upfix does more than just automotive. They also do appliances, fitness, and industrial. I'm only in the cars, so we're going to need our Silverado. And we'll see everything that's available for it. And this is what we're looking for. And there's our code right there. So we printed out our prepaid shipping label. We're going to drop this off at any FedEx location or Walgreens or Dollar General. But first we need to FedEx proof it. See if it makes it there in one piece. And since the supervisor is supervising, she'll be held responsible if it does break. I'm pretty sure I packed this up pretty good. We'll find out. You know they're going to do their destructive testing. So it made it there, and now it made it back in less than a week. It only took them about 6 hours to fix it. The rest of the week, FedEx spent trying to destroy the package. I guess I did a pretty good job because they were not successful. So, let's go throw it back in the car. No programming, just bolt it right back in. Slide it up there. Plug it in. And then slide it down on the solenoids. And we can start our bolts. Just going to start all 4, a couple threads, and then we'll tighten them all down. We'll plug our plugs back in before we forget and wonder why the ABS light's still on. And we can reach up there and tighten up our bolts.
So our mirrors don't work on either side, and it could just go ahead and test all the wires and everything, but Scott's GM Truck Emporium happens to have a mirror switch in stock, so I think we're just going to go ahead and change it and see if it works.
So they seem to be a pretty common failure. This is actually the last one Scott's GM Truck Emporium had in stock. So you just pry out on the sides of the plastic, not too much, just a little bit, and slide that switch out of there. Goes in a lot easier. Just snaps right in. Now we can reinstall it. Plug all our plugs back in. And clip it into the door. You can use the belt molding installation tool. And everything works.
Oh, better.
I'm tired of using my key in the door like a peasant, so we got some key fobs. We're going to go ahead and program them. You just enter the BCM, go into program mode, hold lock and unlock together until the door lock cycle. and then we'll do it again for the other one.
So we've driven around for a little bit. Our check engine light never came back on. That's a pretty easy monitor to set, so pretty confident that our knock sensors took care of that. Not to mention when it was all deteriorated, that's a pretty good indication. Our brake light never came back on, and neither did our ABS light, so that took care of our problem there. So it looks like we're ready to hand this over to the detailing gnome and have him clean it up. So I'll see you when it's clean.
Well, that was fast. The detailing gnome is already done, and we hurry up and get some pictures of this thing before it gets dirty. Black looks really good when it's clean, it just doesn't stay that way for very long. On the plus side, panel painting black is very easy in case you scratch it, dent it, or whatever. And since this truck was originally supposed to be a plow truck for me, that would have been perfect. However, I no longer need it for a plow truck, so it's time to let it go. It was nice to have to pick up parts and haul stuff back and forth to the pile, but it's time to let it go. Not to mention, every once in a while there's imperfections in a build that bother you, not enough to actually fix it, but enough that it just annoys you. And this build has two of them for me. The first was the headliner. The headliner gnome did his first and last headliner for me in this truck. Had to be let go. And the windshield was not put in correctly. They didn't put the moldings on the side when they put the windshield in. So the urethane cured, and when I put the moldings on, the door on the driver's side closes a little tight. And to make it even worse, the windshield is shifted a little far to the driver's side. It's just annoying, not going to hurt anything. I wasn't going to make them come out and redo it and take the chance of them scratching something. And for all the people that were worried that I was putting together a dirty truck, there you go. The engine was nice and clean. Even our bed was clean and not full of stuff. Not how you usually find my trucks. And we got rid of that dirty carpet and put in our floor liner. And you can see the worst part of our headliner there above the headrest. It's got some wrinkles in it, and it's actually coming down in some spots. It didn't stay up there for very long. But the rest of it stayed up, so I'm not going to worry about fixing it. It is a 20-year-old truck.
Well, it looks like this build is finally done, but there's only one way to be absolutely sure. It's time to play everyone's favorite game. You guessed it, what's in my console? We got our haters tiers. There were a lot of them on this one. I almost had to get the barrel. Good thing it's a pickup. We'll hang on to that. What else do we have? Extra bolts. More bolts. More bolts. That's a lot of extra bolts. You'll get that on the bigger jobs. What else is in here? Ah, the Bible. I feel like this should be a scroll. This is all the work that I did on this thing because I can't remember because I'm old. So let's see everything I did on this build that was not part of the rebuild. Front door speakers, rear speakers, a 7-pin trailer connector, a new water pump, heater core, air filter, rear U-joint, rear wheel stud, an idler arm and bracket, a pitman arm, e-brake shoes, rear pads and rotors, front pads and rotors, I can't even read my own writing, left front drive axle, and a left front wheel hub, 4 new tires, 4 new shocks, 2 key fobs, a cam sensor, 2 knock sensors and the harness, intake gaskets, which was actually part of that whole harness thing, but these intake gaskets go bad a lot, so it probably wasn't a bad idea. And, of course, an oil change and an alignment. That was everything that was done in addition to actually fixing what was wrong with it from the accident. So, well, that's gone. So, that looks like it. That was a lot of bolts in the console, so nothing else will fit. So, if you're looking for a nice little Chevy truck for yourself that's not full of rust and has new everything, head over to my website. It'll be listed by the time you're seeing this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next build.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna